We're in Portland Castle. It's on the island of Portland in Dorset. The castle was built during the reign of Henry VIII in the 16th century. We swing across to here, we see the back of the structure, much improved later, but essentially a Tudor artillery fortress. Stepping in through the rear gate of Portland Castle, the first thing we come across is an attractive garden. The building to the left is an administrative building. It was originally used for Royal Navy offices until 1999. Prior to that, it was used during the 18th century and possibly later stage of the 17th century as officer accommodation, etc., etc. These days it houses facilities for visitors, including a cafe and a shop. Straight ahead of you on the right is the back of the main Henry VIII structure, which effectively is a letter D facing out into the harbour. But you'll notice on the roof level there are gun embrasures cut into the wall, and each of those windows would originally have been much smaller and housed another cannon. Right, we're currently inside of Portland Castle. Although called a castle, it's really an artillery fortress. It's a roughly D-shaped curved structure facing out over Portland Harbour, which has been a royal harbour since at least the 16th century, if not sooner. We have a curved outer wall here with gun embrasures and smoke vents above, allowing the smoke of firing to be vented upwards. And this faces out immediately over Portland Harbour. Not explained in my previous clip is the fact that the area that we were standing in was originally roofed over. This English heritage artist's impression shows that same courtyard area in use. Notice the timbers above, notice the longbowmen positioned to the left, and notice the artillery piece. Unlike later 18th and 19th century pieces which had 4 small cast-iron wheels, this has a pair of large wheels at the front and a simple trail at the rear. This of course is an interpretation, but it's probably as used, the type of weapon that was in use. Only a few years prior to this, at Norham Castle, the guns would still have been mounted on sledges. That is evidence that it's Norham by the fact that the artillery embrasure, the opening, is actually down at ground level. So this is definitely an advance. The embrasure is now 2.5, perhaps 3 feet off the ground, and the gun carriage now has large enough wheels that allows it to recoil back and to be properly loaded from the front. Clearly this is a muzzle loader. The guns at Norham may still have been breech loaders. Looking up above one of the current open air embrasures, you can see this large chimney. This is further indication that the courtyard, the open courtyard you see, was originally roofed over. This chimney is to allow the smoke, considerable amount of powder smoke from a fired gun recoiling back into this position to vent out through the roof. Effectively it's a large chimney. Each of the gun ports on this deck has one, and one can imagine that apart from the noise, the stench of powder smoke etc. would have been quite considerable and would quickly have built up. With each gun bouncing back into this area and reeking out powder smoke, the chimneys were clearly vitally important to allow the fighting area to remain tenable. So that's a clear indication that the area here was originally roofed over. So behind the outer wall here with gun embrasures, we have a sort of inner keep structure. Again, this is Henry VIII period, and there would have been more gun emplacements up there, more cannon firing out on a second level out over the harbour, and I believe you'll see an embrasure on top which indicates there's been a third level of guns up there as well. So for its period, third or fourth decade of the 16th century, quite an advanced structure. But of course by this period stone was starting to disappear
and earth and brick were becoming a more favoured material. So this is Portland Castle facing out over Portland Harbour. Now we are actually inside one of the gun embrasures, looking out over the harbour, and what you see there are two Phoenix caissons. These caissons were capable of being flooded and sunk into position, and they are two original parts of the D-Day Mulberry Harbour. Phoenix caissons provided a sea wall in front of the two Mulberry harbours, and these two for some reason were never used. They've remained here ever since. They're still afloat, and it's part of the D-Day connection here at Portland. Another part of the D-Day connection is that many of the troops for Omaha Beach, American troops for Omaha Beach, were unloaded just to my left, rather loaded just to my left, and loaded into LSTs and took part in the actual Omaha assault. So they left from here, Portland, which is the naval base side of Weymouth Bay. In its day, Portland was very much a naval harbour, but these days, as you can see, it tends to be used for sports and leisure. Locals come down here for a swim, etc., etc. But at the height of World War II, this was the site of the sinking of HMS Foylebank, a converted anti-aircraft ship. Portland was just in range of mainland France, and the HMS Foylebank was actually sunk here by Stuka dive bombers. Right, I'm on the upper walls of Portland Castle. The main gun line is below me. I'm looking towards the north. Along that area there were as many as 9 slipways were put in to allow United States vehicles and men to load directly onto LSTs and landing craft, and these troops later took part in the Omaha assault. I'm now going to pan round and show you what the fort is defending. That's the harbour. Over on that side is Weymouth. On this side is Portland Harbour. Officially, the Royal Navy no longer has a major presence here, but as a working port it still attracts some Royal Navy vessels, and I'm of the opinion that that could be HMS Ocean, but I'm not going to swear to it. It's certainly a large Royal Navy auxiliary. As to whether it's the Ocean or one of the fleet trained vessels, I'm not sure. In front of her are the two Phoenix caissons I mentioned earlier on. These are two parts of the original Mulberry Harbour that was used on D-Day to provide a sea wall in front of both the Mulberry Harbour installations. Over here, this is the original Portland Navy base for the Royal Navy, now become more civilianised. And if we keep going around here, again, we eventually reach Portland Castle itself. Down there is the gun line I was on just now. This building here would have had further gun ports in it. It's now been converted into offices and other things. And finally, there have been more artillery up on the roof. So this is a 16th century artillery fort, which later served other functions. It eventually became offices, experimental base, all sorts of things, all sorts of functions that the Royal Navy would have had later than the gunpowder period. So this is Portland Castle, Dorset. One of the more interesting of the interior features of Portland Castle, this area has been set up to resemble a Tudor kitchen. But remember, even as a castle, these windows over here would also have doubled as either lighting or firing embrasures. And my feeling is they've actually been opened out a bit to make them into more adequate windows. So you'll be able to do a flanking fire from the castle here in that direction. This is another view of the Tudor kitchen, just swinging around that way. Off to this side, there's the big kitchen range That's where the majority of the cooking would have been done. So this is Portland Castle, Dorset. Right, this is Portland Castle. We're in Dorset, overlooking. That wasn't me. That wasn't me either. This has been a Warspite production. If you've enjoyed this, please leave a thumbs up. If you've really enjoyed it, please feel free to subscribe. I look forward to seeing you next time. This is Warspite out, and have a very good day.